Good late Wednesday evening, everybody. Meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center with an update on Tropical Storm Eta, where we have this system maintaining those maximum sustained winds around 65 miles an hour or so. As of that latest update, I know we were seeing some winds maybe a little stronger in some of the earlier advisories, but those winds here in that general range as we look back over the last several hours or so, it seems, as we're watching that radar imagery, you can kind of see here a lot of that action in toward the Tampa area, and we're not seeing winds really extreme, knocking out a lot of power or anything like that, but quite a bit of rain has led to a flash flood warning to be issued there in toward the Tampa metro area. So let's go ahead and talk about that here. That goes until 1:15 a.m. for Hillsborough County, also Manatee County there, southwestern Pasco, Pinellas, and Sarasota counties. Doppler radar indicated thunderstorms producing some heavy rain across the warned area. Between 3 and 5 inches of rain have fallen there. So a storm surge impacting the regions too. Got to be aware of that as that storm surge warning goes all the way up the coast there as we get up toward parts of Levy County, impacting Cedar Key as well. We'll kind of get into that here more in a few minutes, but just going to have to watch that flood threat there with the storm surge, with the overall scenario here with those heavy rain bands. And law enforcement, emergency management, they've reported multiple high water rescues according to the Weather Service. So just got to be really careful there this evening as the rainfall threat looks to be the bigger deal there. In addition to that storm surge, talking about the flooding threat in comparison to the actual wind threat there. And you can kind of see with our rainfall estimates around 8 inches in some of these spots as I'm moving the mouse around a little bit. So kind of tells the story here. We just have to be cognizant of that potential as we're looking toward the Bay Area. Again, a flash flood warning there, including Tampa, including St. Petersburg there too. So let's go ahead though, transition a little bit. We're watching the threat for north central Florida as we look ahead, and it's a little bit uncertain in some regard, but we do have new tropical storm warnings in play as we're getting toward parts of our area. I'll dive into those here in a few minutes as well, but a quick synopsis, you might have saw it on the top line there as you were watching the coverage start up here a few minutes ago, but it does include Bradford County, Duval County now, as the tropical storm warnings have also been extended across the state here. They're just watching that wind threat though. Ironically, the rain might not be as big of an issue here in toward North Florida based on some of the computer models, especially as you get north of maybe Gainesville, for instance. We'll just have to wait and see, but it doesn't seem like a lot of the rain would carry over here. Just be some wind in the overall pattern, but we'll have to wait and see as the information does come out as the overnight hours do get closer here in time, and we'll have that coverage for you, of course, as we get later into the overnight hours. I'll probably start in around 1:32, something like that, with more continuous type coverage here to give you the latest as North Central Florida braces for our Tropical Storm Eta here. So again, we're just going to continue to track things, continue to look at some of that wind energy as well here. You can see some of that within this if the winds are actually reaching the surface here that are shown aloft. We'd be talking about winds in that 60, 70 mile an hour range, but I don't think that's really happening based on some of those METAR reports, also based on power outage information. So we'll go ahead and switch you back on over now to our other system to kind of give you an idea of some of those winds in the region. We'll kind of get a couple things loaded on here first so we have a little bit more to detail here, give you that heads up on what is happening overall. So here is our GR Earth computer now. You can kind of see with some of these winds as we're looking toward Brooksville, ironically, getting a little further north now and not too far away, only a couple counties away from Levy, Marion counties in our region, gusts there to 41 knots. So we're talking about some tropical force gusts there for sure. So that would be equivalent there to, it looks like, about 47 miles an hour in toward that Brooksville area, the Hernando County Airport. The wind a little lower to the south here on some of these METAR reports. The Vandenberg Airport, 30 knots. That gets us to about 35 miles an hour. A lot of these just near or under tropical force. It just kind of depends on where you query, and you can see St. Petersburg there, 37 knots. So we're talking about 43 miles an hour. So again, we're going to continue to track things here. I'll broaden it out a little. You see in toward our region right now, the wind's not too strong. Marion, though, a gust there, and Ocala to 20 knots. So that gets us to about 23 miles an hour, but that really should knock out power Duval County, the Jacksonville International Airport, a gust of 22 knots, so that gets us to about 25 miles an hour. 39 miles an hour is that criteria that you need for a situation here when you get those winds to that tropical force. So I'll go ahead and also put on some warnings just so you kind of see that a flash flood warning on the screen toward parts of Hillsborough County. You actually see some rain in towards South Georgia. Not too concerned about that overall, but it's something to watch here. Could get a little bit of rain. I mean, based on some of the models, we might not end up seeing a whole bunch of rain here in North Florida. So ironically, they could end up getting, just depending on where you're at, a little bit more in some of those spots in South Georgia than in North Florida. It's just a complicated situation overall here. As this storm earlier was a hurricane, it was really getting self-organized. I know we cut in this morning. It got classified as a hurricane right after that by the National Hurricane Center. But after that, it kind of, even then, it was starting to lose its structure some. It might have been even a stronger hurricane for a little bit. We had a really well-defined eye, but things not as organized now. But just still watching that storm surge thread is social media pictures there, according to the chat, of some storm surge flooding in St. Pete Beach there, as well as some water over the roadways and boat docks, Pinellas County. So I just have to be really cognizant there as we look here at our wind arrows. You've kind of been able to see where that center is in general here, that lowest pressure as well. So just something to kind of look at here. But I'm going to put on our forecast model now. We'll take off some of this other residual information, and we'll get over toward that. I'll load that on, and it'll take just a moment as you're maybe just tuning in here. We're trying to give you an idea of what could happen. This is just one model here. It's the ACRRR, but you can kind of see it's not doing the best job, but it's not doing a terrible job either, as we're trying to initialize about now. You can kind of see we're watching that accident around Tampa to see how it progresses, and it has it kind of falling apart here. It may hold together a little bit better than this, and if so, we'd get a little more wind translated to the surface, maybe, as well as we're looking toward maybe Marion County, even Levy County here as well, as we've been talking about. So we're just kind of moving this along. This here, I know we're not able to put those times on the screen, but this right here is looks like about 15 Z, so that will take us to about 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. You still have some of that accent around. And another thing that's kind of important, I'll go ahead and put this on. I might even back it up. It's just kind of interesting to go back and forth on some of our model information. But you'll be able to kind of see here where those wind arrows are setting up. You'll kind of get a grasp of the overall scenario here, and you kind of see where the center is. You don't have much on the back side based on this, so that would be pretty good here for sure. As we're going ahead and looking here, I'll move this forward a little bit more. It takes a little while for our wind arrows to catch up, but this is as we get to about the lunch hour. So I know we lose a few friends when we're doing this because it pulls a lot here in our system, trying to load all that extra information in. I had to model actually loaded in with the simulated radar, but I didn't have the wind arrows here, so I had to do that kind of on the fly. And you can kind of see we have that center still maybe hanging around. We're not exactly sure on that timetable. I'll pull up the actual track, but the center is not a huge deal overall, as we're starting to see the moisture move off. This is again around noon here. We'll go ahead and I think just move past this at this point. You kind of get the idea how things are situated here. Doesn't show a whole lot of rain in our model, and we'll just have to wait and see though, because things are just not being modeled the very best here with some of this. As we look at the 6-hour projected totals, we're looking toward Marion, and this is underdoing it to some extent, I think, but it may not be underdoing it too much, and that kind of gives you an idea. We might not get a whole bunch of rain with this despite the school closures. We have to just watch out for that wind potential though, because that SID knockout, I would expect a few power outages here at least, and maybe as we get toward Marion, Levy, a little bit more in that 25% type range per se. We'll just have to wait and see though, because we haven't even got to that range as we've got toward the south and toward some of those coastal zones, but maybe some trees falling. We'll just have to wait and see here overnight towards some of our southern areas, especially as again we look at some of this model information. But we'll go ahead and move away from the forecast model for now. I think we'll go ahead and put the radar back on real quick to be able to see what's happening here across the region, really across the tri-state. And we'll go ahead and pop on here some other details as well. Again, that flash flood warning to the south as in effect, it looks like, until about 1:15. And now we're going to look outside here right now. We're going to look at some of our weather stem cameras in toward North Florida. We'll go ahead and take you over toward the baseball grounds just to kind of see how it looks right now. You're not going to probably see too much, and yeah, you're not going to see very much there. And then Tropical storm warning there, tropical storm warning also at University of Florida as well. And you can kind of see some of that cloud cover around, something that's interesting to note for sure here in the overall setup. But right now, I think we'll just go ahead and look back at some other systems. I'll pull on some of those temperatures real quick so we can kind of see what's happening, since we didn't have a regular update, kind of an interesting scheduling situation with Veterans Day and the like. But you see 77 right now in the Keystone area. We'll watch to see if there's enough instability, enough of those parameters coming together for tornadic activity. But the chances look relatively low. I know we did have a threat kind of come together earlier to the south. You still see that marginal risk. It does include parts of Levy, Marion, Putnam, Flagler as we get later into the overnight. So always important to have that way, have multiple ways to get those alerts as you are looking ahead in the timeline. But again, we're just going to kind of continue to watch this. Let's pull on that track here. I'll pull on that information real quick. I'll even keep the wind radii details up too, so you kind of see what's happening, plus that model information where you see the models are in pretty good agreement at this point. You see one of those models having it over Union County, Bradford line around 7 a.m. The official forecast there toward Gainesville as a lower end tropical storm around 7 a.m. But keep in mind, a lot of this is going to be on that eastern side. So as we're looking west of the center, probably not much rain at all here really. And the eastern side, well, a little bit more. And if you get further down, depending on how much holds together, we're just going to have to wait and see how it plays out, because it's kind of a tricky forecast overall. But they are getting quite a bit of rain down there, as we've seen with it being over the water. That center is able to kind of have that accent hit around the Tampa region. And you again kind of see that windfill forecast getting some of those winds here, even off toward the western side of that track as well. But again, 7 a.m. here, you see it over North Florida. If you're kind of new to the latest information, 7 p.m. you see it way away pretty much here as we're looking off of Savannah as maybe still a tropical storm. That's a big change from what we were showing you yesterday afternoon when we had it maybe hanging around as a depression all the way through Saturday. But now this gets out of here, and that's some great news for everybody with those weekend plans trying to get this out of the picture. And that is definitely something that you'll want to kind of look forward to, at least getting this out of the way. And I know next week we'll start to see a cool down come into the picture as things will really fall off, and that'll make for, I guess you could say, more average type of conditions for this time of year. I know just in terms of scheduling, while we're looking at this before I transition, we won't be on with our normal update tomorrow, but of course we're going to be on all night here with the very latest information starting in a few hours, depending on exactly what happens with the progression of things down to our south. And then we'll be on most of the night here and toward the morning with those updates about every half hour or so, getting close to maybe around noon. It just kind of depends. We're going to play it by ear based on exactly how this situation sets up. But again, we'll be watching things tomorrow. I'll be back on Friday with sports weather at our normal time frame. But now let's get to the graphics. We'll go ahead and see a normal view of this that a lot of you are accustomed to, and you'll be able to see the tropical storm warning there in that darker blue as we're looking up as far north as the Swanee River. And then on the east coast, again, new information there. I do have our information kind of plotted over it with our 45-mile-an-hour wind potential at 7 a.m. tomorrow around Gainesville. But Flagler County to the Volusia County area line, we're talking about Flagler-Volusia County line, to the St. Andrews Sound. We're going with that tropical storm warning there, as this should hold together as a tropical storm all the way across the peninsula, maybe getting into far southeastern Georgia. But that's not the big takeaway here. But again, you see that system a little weaker, but still maintaining itself overall, 65-mile-per-hour max sustained winds. That movement right now north at 12, but we're going to watch here maybe a turn here as we look ahead a little bit more. Honestly, you're already seeing kind of a turn here with the overall scenario, but 993 millibars, that pressure pretty low, but not extremely low. It's an indication here. It's indicative of a pretty strong system, but again, not a hurricane at this point, not expecting it to re-strengthen. They canceled the hurricane watch earlier, but they added a storm surge warning, including Levy County, and they're already seeing some of those impacts. You can see that surge warning as you're looking down here on the map in that darker purple, lighter purple, a surge watch as we get toward Dixie County, those coastal regions, tropical storm watch all the way up to that Taylor County coastal area too. And then the tropical storm warning has been expanded now to include quite a few places here. In fact, as we're looking Lake City over towards Stark, Gainesville, Ocala, Jacksonville, Green Cove Springs, St. Augustine, Flagler Beach, you kind of get the idea. here as things are happening. You can kind of see that path here, or that center where the winds will be around. But again, the rain threat, we're not too concerned. There's no flash flood watch here, with the exception of Levy County. No flood watch except for that Levy County area here, as we've been talking about. But still, just make sure you chart up those devices, because some of you, not many, but some of you may lose power here as we're looking toward North Florida. Some of you probably will lose power, but not a lot of you. I'm not expecting widespread power outages, but it's still a good idea to chart up those devices and be on the safe side. You see, as around 2 a.m. or so, we're getting into more of that accident as we're getting closer towards Gainesville. We're starting to see those winds pick up a little bit, it seems. And you see by about 8 a.m. or so, we're getting those winds to pick up even further over along the first coast, and maybe even a little bit earlier than that. Now, in terms of those peak wind gusts, I'm keeping about what I had this morning. I didn't make any changes to this, despite having that warning upgraded there toward our area, like around Stark, for instance. And then the warning added to some other areas as well. Just kind of keeping that potential here in that 45-mile-an-hour range for that peak gust, which could knock out a little bit of power, but again, shouldn't be a huge deal. Chances of some more power outages a little bit higher as we get toward the south. And then the overall view, you see that coastal threat a little bit higher, maybe a just to 60 and toward Levy County, as we're looking down there towards Cedar Key, something like that, maybe even getting toward western Marion. But again, we're going to continue to watch this. We'll have coverage later on in the night. I just wanted to come on now before some of you go to bed, as you just want to chart those devices. Nothing to really stress out about, but have them where you can have those alerts just in case a tornado warning pops up, because we'd have those winds, of course, be quite a bit higher within a tornado than you would see with this if one were to evolve, even though the chances of that pretty low right now. Just have that alert method, have those alert methods in play as we now look ahead here toward that storm surge threat. A storm surge warning remaining in effect here from Bonita Beach to the Swanee River. You see 3 to 5 feet, and we've been getting some pretty high values down there near Tampa, having an impact. They have issues down there with surge, the west coast of Florida. And as we get closer toward our region, 2 to 4 feet, still enough for a surge warning there, a storm surge warning as we're looking up to the Swanee River, and a watch to the Steinhatchee River there. So we're going to continue to track that potential. We're going to go ahead and, in fact, I think we're going to switch it over now toward our other system. I do have some information pulled up. I'll try to get this on the screen for you. See if we have this in here. And it looks like we do. It looks like we have some values here that are starting to get a little higher in towards Cedar Keys. And let me just go ahead and switch this over real quick. Just bear with me as we do so. And we'll go ahead now and take our other system. You'll be able to see what's happening there. And here is our observed water levels at Cedar Key. So you kind of see a little bit of a rise here. I have to kind of put the mouse on here. You can see maybe around 2 feet there above ground. Nothing extreme, but we're seeing that number get up. You're seeing a little bit of a bounce, but it's not huge. It's not an extreme event per se at this point by any stretch of the imagination. I know they've had some pretty big issues from storms like Hermine. We'll just have to wait and see. It kind of compares. We look ahead later in the night. I know we had the high tide there just a little while ago, and we're going to have another high tide about 11:30 in the morning, but hopefully by then things will be a little bit better. As we get down toward the south, though, we are watching some of these areas down here. You can see around 2.5 feet, it looks like, the water level there near Clearwater. As we get towards St. Petersburg, you see a little bit of a rise there, around 3.5 feet, give or take. As we're looking at some of this information, Port Manatee around 3 feet or so. So just trying to give you a little bit of that information here inside baseball and some of these numbers as we are watching that storm surge threat to see how high the water is above ground. Nothing extreme, but causing some issues down toward Tampa. Threat a little less as we get toward our Levy County zone, but it's not zero by any means. A surge warning in play, so I just have to be cognizant of that. Hopefully you took some of those precautions. We've been talking about that threat here. Looking back earlier in the day, we were talking about some of those numbers that could cause some issues here in toward that region, Levy County, Cedar Key again. But let's go ahead now. Go ahead and switch away from this, and I think we'll go ahead and switch you back over to our velocity mode. We're still watching some of that wind energy around. and just kind of stick with that potential here as we see how much translates to the ground here later in the war tonight. That'll be interesting just to kind of monitor. But again, the surge potential there, we're paying attention. We're watching that rainfall forecast as well, where you see the rainfall kind of cuts off some as we get further up toward North Florida and southeastern Georgia here, and the rest of our region here as well. Last as you're looking away from the system itself. But again, we're just gonna kind of watch because again, some of those spots could actually end up picking up a little bit more off toward the west than they do as they get further toward the east. It just kind of depends on all the different variables in play with this and the uniqueness of the system. But a flash-flood watch does still continue to include Levy County. You see by that Tampa Ruskin office there. We see more rain actually up toward eastern North Carolina and eastern South Carolina than what we're seeing really even toward the Tampa region, but especially toward North Florida and South Georgia as you're looking ahead in toward that timeline. The Tampa region numbers could end up being pretty similar to what we see as we kind of add things together looking up toward the north there. But again, I think we're going to go ahead and start to wrap this up here pretty soon. What a season it's been. We have Eta we're talking about now. Theta's out there too. Not a threat for us. Probably going to have Iota pretty soon. We'll watch that. Too early to speculate there for the most part. I'm hoping it'll stay to our south, stay to the south, but not going to get too much more into that right now as we're just watching a historic season, the most named storms we've ever seen in the Atlantic Basin 1 year. So let's go ahead now and move away from the graphics. Again, you're looking at that wind energy on velocity. And I'll go ahead and switch you back to the regular reader right now. Again, you're starting to see some of this encroach upon Marion, and we'll see how much wind kind of reaches the surface there. You see quite a bit of loft. I mean, these numbers are up around 60, but we're not getting those winds really over land too much right now, which is good. But technically, max sustained winds up to 65, so you just have to be mindful of that here as we are looking ahead. Just make sure you have those ways to get those alerts, of course. I'll be typing up an article for cloudsweather.com and having that out here in a little bit before we start our coverage here as we look ahead later into where those overnight hours that we've been talking about as we're getting there again around 2 a.m., 1:30, somewhere around there. Kind of just based on how the storm acts here. Of course, if a tornado warning pops up in our area sooner than that, it will break in immediately to keep you and your family safe there. You'll want to get in that interior room away from windows if that situation does come to fruition. Real quick, let's pop up his power outage numbers as we do have poweroutage.us up right now. This is always interesting for perspective, and these numbers aren't all that impressive, which is good despite getting all those surge reports toward Tampa. The surge doesn't really affect the power per se generally. Not always, of course, though. As you look at Manatee County, 4,412 customers there out right now in the dark, and then as we get toward Hillsborough County, a couple thousand, you kind of get the idea. 14,000 the state total. Looking toward our region, Marion actually a few, a lot to a none. Putnam 100. You kind of don't see many up here overall, but we'll continue to watch. I know there's schools, a lot of districts closed tomorrow just to be on the safe side. You got to be careful here. You just never know how things can evolve. It's always good to be on the safe side here with things and just kind of take heed as necessary. As we continue to watch the system, I know, unfortunately, there was a fatality reported by local media down there earlier in toward West Central Florida with an electrocution with some of that water coming on into the picture. So you just always got to be extra careful here. You just got to be really, really careful in these situations. That pretty much does it for now. We're going to wrap things up. We're going to work on that article a little bit more, have that out as we look later on in toward those evening, overnight hours. I'll be back with some live coverage where I'll be in front of the camera as we look ahead around 1:32 a.m. Thanks so much for tuning in and stay safe out there.